Shubham, head of ecosystem at Manta Network. All right, from that side, let's give him a round of applause. Jay Jideliov, founder of Belong.net. Jay, please, come on, sit on stage. Femi Fenia, who is Chief Information Officer at Arena Games. Femi, please. And I'll be moderating the panel, so you know me, so I'll sit here. All right. So guys, we'll proceed with questions more or less, and then I'd like to leave a few minutes for the panel discussion as well. Could you guys please put the timer on so that we're on time? All right. So given that we will be speaking about centralized and decentralized exchanges, the first question I'd like to ask you is to introduce yourself first, and to make sure you list some advantages of the place you represent, you know, whether it's exchange, whether it's an app, whether it's something else, so that the audience here understands what side you come from. And then let's jump into the question. So let's start from this side, and then maybe we'll switch it later on.
Going, guys, I'm Jay, the founder of Belong.net. So we are the real-world access layer of Web3. So essentially making Web3 accessible to users who may not have had expertise, while allowing brands to essentially reward users for learning new things and re-engaging with the economy. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jay.
So my name is Alessandro. I actually live in Tbilisi since 2021. And I work at Kraken since 2017. And the main app, you know, that we have, and we can talk later, is to have like a trust, like, you know, exchange for run on and off of, like, you know, fiat to crypto.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Shubham, the head of ecosystem at Manta Network. Manta is a layer 2 solution on Ethereum, and as topic suggests, it's about centralized and decentralized exchanges. So we are the only one chain which Binance is leading as an investor. But apart from that, we have around 233 dApps already onboarded. Plus, we are the only first chain with the modular technology with the help of Celestia. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Femi. I'm the CIO at Arena Games. And I also happen to be a token engineer, so I help projects launch their tokens and define their tokenomics. And I've been in this space for a few years, like since 2013, and I have interesting anecdotes to talk about, especially concerning issues with centralized exchanges. So we're going to fight a little bit.
Well, we definitely expect that, because we see more or less the centralized exchanges are dominantly represented here, but I think the discussion will be all right. Femi, all right, let's start with you. And I'd like to ask you more of a general question to begin with. Could you list some technical and philosophical differences that exist between decentralized and centralized exchanges? What comes to mind when you discuss the differences between the two?
Excellent question. So the idea of crypto and the way it started with Bitcoin originally is to kind of bank the unbanked, and also to create a decentralized system, a decentralized currency. And there's an ethos to the industry, which is adopted by a lot of projects. And the idea of a decentralized exchange really fits with that ethos of having everything decentralized. Your keys, your tokens, as we say in the industry, which means that if you interact with the DEX, you still own everything. Everything is in your wallet. It's not in the custody of another entity that you have to trust. I'm not saying that you should not trust all these entities, because they're all super trustworthy today. But the main difference is really decentralized exchanges are really pushing that ethos forward, and they're pushing the whole industry into that direction. And centralized exchanges, from my position, are also helping the industry, but I see them as almost crypto banks in the end, because they need to be super regulated. They need to kind of like secure things, but they also custody the tokens of everybody. So if you have tokens on a centralized exchange, and I'll tell the story later, those are not your tokens. Those belong to the centralized exchange. You have like you can claim them at one point, but they are custodied by that centralized exchange, and that's the main difference to me. Although these centralized exchanges offer better features, more liquidity, and then we can talk about all of this, for me, it always comes down to I own my own tokens. I take the risk with them. I can be hacked and whatever, but they are still in my wallet, in my pocket, and that's how I see it.
Femi, let me ask you additional question. Based on the differences that you just mentioned, how do you think they influence user trust and, in general, system integrity as well? Because I'd like to go deeper into these topics. So let me ask you this, and then we'll continue with the other panelists.
Yeah. So technically, there's multiple issues that could happen both sides, and I can tell like stories that happened to me personally. I started early, and I got burned twice. First with Mt. Gox, and everybody knows the story. And the second one was even a bigger hurt for me because I was mining Bitcoins. I had 100 and something Bitcoins back then, and they were all on a centralized exchange called Crypti. And that Crypti exchange disappeared overnight with all my Bitcoins.
Same.
So we got hurt. Today, I think at least the big exchanges are a little bit more secure, and I trust them more. But when I lost all my Bitcoins back then, I promised to myself to not trust anybody else. I'm gonna keep custody of my own tokens. But that's not as perfect because I also lost tokens by clicking on the wrong link, and then like a smart contract just like absorbed all my tokens in a few seconds, and I started shaking, and I couldn't do anything about it. Like they were gone. If I was on a centralized exchange, maybe I could have had something back. So on both sides, on one side it's a trust issue, so you need to trust the centralized exchange, and sometimes it's also a regulation issue. On the other side, it's like a computer security. You need to know what you're doing. Although I'm an expert in the field, I did click on the wrong link, and I did lose my tokens that day. So I'm not recommending to do anything for anybody, but usually if you do the right steps, you can self-custody your tokens. If you can't really manage that properly, then maybe a centralized exchange would be a better option.
Alessandro, you are representing here Kraken, which is one of the biggest exchanges in the world. I'd like to ask you, what architectural choices does indeed Kraken implement to protect users from such exploits that you and Femi here talked about?
Yeah, thank you. So, well, connected to Femi, at Kraken, what we do is educating people in the first sense. So, like, we repeat over and over to consider Kraken as an exchange, not a wallet. So, what we like to see is people, deposit $10,000, buy Bitcoin, and withdraw the Bitcoin, right, to their own wallet. So, yeah, like he said, like, not your keys, not your coin. That's like, should be like very clear. However, like a lot of people come from, the traditional banking system. So they're in habit to have somebody that they trust, right? However, like, should be very clear when you put, money on exchange, they're not your coin. So the exchange can block because a new regulation came up. If you remember Canada with the Trackster, rebellion or like, protest. So yes, that's the first thing, educating people, and yeah, get out, keeping your, wallet, whatever you choose, like, could be Trezor, Ledger, paper wallet. But what we notice is a lot of people still prefer to have somebody that, custody your coins or token. However, that's not like, the ethos of Kraken, right? We don't collect fees if you hold your Bitcoin on Kraken like, BlackRock or similar, right? So, consider Kraken as exchange. Get in, buy, get out, and do whatever you want with your coins.
Shubham, we usually agree that the weakest point in the whole chain, the whole ecosystem is usually human part, because usually technically the exchange or any other place could be well adapted, but then person can click the link and then it could all go south. I'd like to continue the point that Alessandro mentioned about education. How do we educate people? In the concrete terms, what do we tell them? Okay, we can tell them that not your keys, not your Bitcoin, okay, but what goes beyond that? How do we actually touch the brain cells, of people?
Got it. So actually, I'll just start with the brief about how decentralized exchanges work over here. So we have seen a kind of evolution starting with V2, where it was a unlimited spread, then V3 where limited spread, and V4 when it comes around developer focus, where you can integrate with different APIs. So right now, the first question is how and what things we as a chain is doing on this side. So there are very few steps like you can easily do that. So if you have seen a lot of chains right now posting anything about their contents and links on Twitter, they post "do not get fooled" in the end of that thread. That is the first thing and very simple thing which every project usually do right now. Apart from that, second and the major step which a chain or any project used to do like initially was about the auditing of smart contracts. But right now, recently, there are many cyber security companies who provide you official things where phishing and other things are being stopped. So that is the second major thing which we are also doing right now. If you have seen, like recently, ZK Sync and Linear got hacked because of a DEX. It was around 10 million. So it was not that big as compared to other, but still the initial issue was because of the contract which was mentioned. And the third and the like last part which I focus, like Manta focus on, is about the education with the help of like the links which are not officially promoted on our website. So say suppose if there is a DEX or anything, if you want to use and if you are not sure about it, if you're not sure about the campaign which we are running right now, you can just go to the website. You'll have all the things mentioned on the website. So recently we announced CD5, which is a part of like DeFi and CeFi, where you will get all the custody by yourself and you will get all the decentralized like non-custody of your wallet, but it will be have simple features like Binance Earn, or maybe there are multiple offers which a centralized exchange provides. So all these links are officially mentioned on the website. All the things are promoted by Manta Network. If it's not, then do not click on the link. That's the main thing. Apart from that, even if you by any chance connect your wallet, so the simple and the like first thing is okay. So in case if you by any chance click and you got to know about it, you can still report to Manta, and we have a personalized mod for this. So for example, if the hack is about to happen or you got to know that you already clicked on a wrong link, you can report us, and if it's about Manta token, so we can reimburse you for that.
Okay, so the outtake here is don't click the links. Sometimes maybe you can click them. Jay, so just think before you click. Jay, when you prepare for token launch on centralized exchange, how does Belong.net evaluate different aspects? In terms of costs, in terms of security, market reach, and in general, what strategies do you employ to manage the costs associated with that transaction?
I feel now we're living through another hype cycle, so that essentially you have a lot of entrants competing for the same number of listings, right? So obviously, as you would expect, the prices would go higher, then the options would become less available for the dates you want and so on. So it's a matter of essentially not getting yourself tethered to the current narrative in terms of whether that's a bull or a bear. If you're building a solid product, if it's generating revenue, then fundamentally any delays in that are okay and are survivable. However, that being said, if you are in a game of commitments to particular launch dates, then of course, based on your metrics and the performance, you can negotiate with exchanges, and we're seeing that, especially if the audiences are larger, because at the end of the day, and I think that exchanges would agree, to them, it's a matter of how many new users we bring to their platform,
It's
how
about
many
the
new
volume,
wallets
right? Yeah.
get
That's how the
created,
exchange make money,
and
right?
exactly, and how much new liquidity those users bring, right? Because it cannot be all farmed, it cannot be a number of big players just staking to get yield on your token. What they're doing now is more and more things like, hey, we're gonna do listing by vote, and then the limit would be 10,000 per wallet, so that they know that it's not just a whale sponsoring that launch and pushing it through, that there are actual real users. And we have more and more also new implementations of kind of anti-cyber attacks for those different listings and farming and so on. But however, as technology gets better in protecting ourselves from those fake volumes, so do the kind of the other side of the stick, right? Where we have more sophisticated algorithms, farming, botting, and so on. That it's a never-ending game, I think.
disclaimer here, Kraken doesn't take any fee for listing, so we want to be actually completely independent and, just look at the metrics you mentioned. We are different from other exchanges where you have like a fee to pay. We actually, cover the cost ourselves, so we are free to decide which project is, right for, then is of course the volume counts, but is as well, because we are American company about, what the legal, environment, the compliance and all those.
Yeah, and there are different structures for launches, right? Sometimes it's a listing fee, sometimes you commit to a certain token distribution, sometimes it's a marketing budget. So in any way you slice it, nobody's going to launch anything for free unless there's a significant upside for them in doing so. So that's why perhaps if you're ahead of your tier one meme coin that would bring them volume, they would list it for free on your terms, but otherwise there's going to be some form of incentive because they're also doing their job. They need to generate the revenues. And those are definitely important considerations to know that, hey...
And that's the first metric actually we look is 30-day volume at the end, like, worldwide. So like how does it work? Most likely, coins generally list on the tier 2, tier 3, exchanges, and then, start, generating, volume, and you'll see, those metrics, and then one project is, relevant for Kraken, another is not as relevant, right?
Sure, sure. And now, as there's more competition for the same number of launch pods, also you oftentimes see things in contracts like, hey, you have to commit to a particular, price distribution. You have to maintain the price of the token. You have to essentially provide additional kind of securities for an exchange that would potentially also dump your tokens if there's a token structure involved in payment for that. So I don't know how it is with Kraken, but one lesson we've learned is that everyone is going to dump on you, and everyone's just in it to make money. Whether we're talking about market makers, exchanges, KOLs, the first chance they got, they're gonna sell.
What about having a long vesting period, for example, for VC and
Of course, and you're fighting your emissions schedule essentially, right? So you're floating. Okay, we're releasing those new tokens. Hey, but there are also ways to work with that, right? Like releasing major announcements when tokens are released. So maybe somebody's not gonna dump whatever is available, but fundamentally, it's like the map of kind of what sell pressure to expect, right? If we're talking about new emissions.
This is great, by the way. I love very active discussion. Let's switch to decentralized exchanges for a bit, and I'd like to start from that side and ask an open question. Obviously, Femi, what you said, decentralized exchange is in a way associated with the whole idea of crypto because you are there alone, having your own control over your own money, but at the same time, decentralized exchanges are associated with a lot of vulnerabilities that come with that particular side. I'd like to ask all of you, what are some of the problems, some of the problem vectors, vulnerabilities that come to mind when we talk about decentralized exchanges?
There's different categories of problems, obviously. The main one is coming from code. So if a smart contract has a vulnerability, at one point, a hacker will find out about that and will exploit it. So exploits and hacks are one of the issues in the industry. Although we've been getting better and better every year, there will always be hacks. That's something that we need to live with. On the other side, there's also an economic aspect that a lot of people are not really looking at, which is with DEXs, there's a lot of liquidity fragmentation, which means they don't necessarily have enough liquidity for people to trade without slippage. And that is one of the issues in the industry. Although on the other side of the coin, I would say, DEXs have all the tokens. When on centralized exchanges, you have to wait until the tier 2s list the token and then show decent volume, and then tier 1 list the token and then again show decent volume. You're late in the game. So if you're trying to kind of snipe meme coins or stuff, you have to do it on DEXs, obviously. Then there's the risk of rug pulls, there's the risk of security, there's the risk of also like other types of scams, as I mentioned, like the drainers, where it seems legit. You click on the wrong link and then someone drains your funds. It's almost the Far West when it comes to DEXs. You have to know what you're doing, you have to trust the right DEXs and do transactions properly. Today, I think with the new wallets and the new security layers on top of those wallets, we're better covered than maybe even 1 year ago. And the other thing is DEXs are catching up in terms of like functionalities. Centralized exchanges, they have these order books that are super fluid. They have limit trades. They have like, I don't know, all kinds of like financial vehicles that DEXs don't necessarily have. So you might have one functionality on Uniswap, and then you have to go to GMX to do the other functionality. So you're moving your funds around. It's not the best experience. So there's no DEX today that has all the different functions that a trader needs. You need to have like multiple DEXs to fulfill, and that adds an additional risk, obviously, because you're moving funds around from one platform to another. And a cost, yeah, and gas.
Actually, my experience is quite similar over here as well. So when we talk about decentralized exchange, first of all, most of the DEXs are forked from Uniswap code. So definitely they don't have to audit it first of all. But after that, once they add new features, they need to audit that particular feature only. Apart from that, second, you mentioned about limit orders and stuff. So I think so in DEX and centralized exchange, there is one simple difference. Everything in centralized exchange needs to be done by centralized exchange. If you need a new feature, centralized exchange has to build it, has to bring it out. But for a decentralized ecosystem, for example, if there is a slippage on particular DEX, they can go to any aggregator who can help them to sort this thing out. If you want to use a bridge, you don't have to create a bridge. You can just integrate an API, which can help you to do the bridging as well. So this is very simple as well, and each and everyone can focus on any particular thing. So for example, if I'm an expert in bridging part, so even if I'm working with the DEX, I just need to handle the bridging thing, and it can be sorted out easily. Apart from that, on the benefits first, definitely any token can be listed, and if you have enough liquidity for both ends, or maybe if you're using V3 for just one end, if you have the liquidity, you can easily push it out and you can launch your token without any permission from any exchange or from AML or anything. Second, users get rewards to provide liquidity. So even if you go to a centralized exchange, you hold your token, you don't get anything. But if you go to a decentralized exchange, you provide liquidity. I think right now on Uniswap, it's around 0.15%, whatever out of 2% they give you. So this is the major feedback or maybe the benefits which actual users on DeFi gets. Apart from that, as a chain, so we work with centralized exchange plus decentralized exchanges as well. So the major difference behind this is there are two different audiences. So say suppose if we launch some good project right now on Manta, so that doesn't affect the price or volume on a centralized exchange. But if suppose there is a big news from a Web2 perspective or maybe anything which drive the market, so the centralized exchange community pumps up all the tokens, which eventually affect the decentralized exchanges as well. So there is a very different audience who are currently using. So for example, recently because of the airdrops and stuff, like after the token launch, there is a drop in the TVL. So that time the price on centralized exchange doesn't matter because it's still sustainable, it's still going around because we were listed on all the top exchanges, including you as well. So that is the major thing which I feel right now the decentralized exchanges should follow, and they are currently doing well because you get more incentive, you get more reasons to use it. On centralized exchange, you don't get any reason apart from trading and having the liquidity. Even audit book is right now available, bridging is available. If there are future incentive from that particular DEX, you get that as well.
I'll add that, DEX serve a different type of people as well. So if you think about, centralized exchange like Kraken, and you are a hedge fund from Zurich, all right, you need a big exchange, like as a counterparty, because, you need the trust. You need to also have a bunch of statement documents, right? So, if Ernst & Young is your auditor, right? Comes directly to Kraken to ask, for documentation, and so everything has to be, structured, right? On the other hand, if you are, for example, a guy that was born in Tehran and you have an Iranian passport, it's very difficult to be able to open probably an account, right? So, DEXs are also there, and actually volume on DEXs are huge. Uniswap now we have Jupiter, even past, Uniswap. They serve all, these bankless people, that is pretty much the original idea of Bitcoin, right? So like, DEX are there for a lot of people that not have access actually to the, traditional finance, right?
Actually, there is one more thing on the decentralized exchange. So in a centralized exchange, whenever you want to launch a token, you need to get permission from the exchange. But right now, if you go to a big DEX as well, like Uniswap, PancakeSwap, or anyone, even you have to propose it to the DAO first. How much liquidity, how much incentives you are going to provide for the initial bootstrapping liquidity. So according to that, your token has been approved. If approved by the snapshot person or maybe the controlling risk management team, then only your token is listed on the TGA.
So question here is like, if you think about Satoshi, which one you will prefer?
For now, definitely, as it is a bull market, so I would prefer decentralized exchange because I'll definitely get more rewards and stuff.
Jay, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, like I like the reference of DEX as being kind of the Wild West, that it's taming in some ways, like validation and kind of listening, but for major ones, for the smaller ones, there's still a way to do things independently, right? But then you get the flaws like full-on gas wars, for example, for any opportunities, right, for any arbitrage. You have, somebody always trying to front run you, and because you're not dealing with centralized entity or their API that's, for example, rate limited or secured or validated, now you have all sorts of algorithms that are built in order to abuse the system, drain the liquidity, snipe, front run, and so on. So definitely a lot of risks, but if we're talking about like traders who want to get in early on something, then DEXs often provide that opportunity for alpha, essentially.
One of the, you wanted to add anything? Okay. One of the things associated with decentralized exchanges usually is the perceived complexity of whatever, buying the coin or selling the coin. It's perceived part. It may not be difficult, but some people, especially new players on the crypto market, they do perceive it as complex because it requires sometimes, operations that you don't do in traditional finance. Based on that, and based on the fact that crypto market is increasing always, and there will be, need the convergence point for mass adoption. What is the future, in your opinion? Will there be platforms that resemble more or less decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges at the same, within the same platform, or the DEXs and CEXs will remain separate? What's your vision for the future? Let's start from Jay and go this way.
I think that eventually the convergence is inevitable. So as we try to extract more value from our daily activities and participation in any of those economies, we're looking for the quickest, cheapest, most secure, but at the same time, most alpha providing way to do anything, right? So there's going to be definitely maxes on both sides that say, hey, I'm not going to do the Wild West, or I'm not going to do central ownership of my assets. But at the same time, we are seeing additional layers of identity validation and user authentication proofs available even in a decentralized way. So although there's not going to be, I think, a full player of each side of this that will be sustainable in the longer run, I think there are still more and more ways to kind of do things in an independent way if we're talking about participation in any of the decentralized or centralized economies of today.
I think it's very difficult because you have, like in the Western world, a lot of regulation you need to follow. Like if you think about right now, UK is asking people, to say they are the owner of this address or that address, right? So big exchanges have to navigate into a world where you need to answer to somebody else, right? While the intrinsic mission of the DEX is actually you own your token. So the regulator in Europe, they want you, Kraken, to have the custody or to be able to block a transaction or not, right? And so if something goes wrong or you have a sanction address, then they come to you. So they want to have somebody that they can knock at the door, right? So to allow DEX pretty much then you will lose maybe the license in the UK, right? So it's tricky. So at least in the Western world, in new worlds or emerging markets, maybe maybe. But like, you know, we see like Uzbekistan, for example, is, you know, doing more and more regulation. A lot of governments are moving into regulation, right? So I don't know if it's possible, to be honest.
So the simple answer for this is yes, it is inevitable. Eventually, all the centralized exchanges will also provide the similar service. And right now, exchanges are doing it. So for example, right now I use Binance, plus I have Binance Wallet as well. I use Bybit. Bybit has their Bybit wallet as well, which is connected to multiple DEXs, multiple DeFi protocols as well. Similarly, BitGet recently announced their wallet, and there are many other other exchanges who have their own DEX or maybe a DeFi ecosystem. Plus, they have their wallet, which is synced with the exchange.
So I have a question, but do you need to log in into these wallets?
Definitely, definitely.
So if you need to log in, I mean, you are docs, right, at the end of the day?
So there are two aspects for this. So for example, you have a chance either to hold your own assets, and it can be a separate entity, similar to Bybit is doing. If you hold the wallet, it's a different thing, but it's still by the Bybit. So for example, if you hold the tokens in your exchange, you can easily transfer that into Bybit wallet. It won't charge you any fees or stuff, but still there can be a way where we can be doxed on that particular end. But to remain anon and stuff, if you're so degen, so definitely you won't go to the exchanges, first of all. You'll definitely go to the decentralized exchange. Apart from that, on the other side, how centralized or maybe a decentralized exchange is trying to cover the gap between it. So the first is about, if you have heard, Balancer is trying to provide limit order books and stuff. So that is the another stuff where we are trying to get all the bots, all the AI things into a decentralized exchange so that it can be compatible to a normal user as well. But definitely right now, even it's my suggestion, like if you are not into crypto, if you're not used any exchange or anything, so definitely you should not go with the decentralized exchanges.
My answer is actually no. I think that there's conversions happening, and we can see it clearly. We see, as you mentioned, all these centralized exchanges actually launching either a wallet or even launching a chain, like we see with Base, for example. They see a clear advantage in doing so because the industry started with this decentralization ethos, and they are centralized entities, and they own so many assets, and they have so many users that they can actually leverage that and launch their own chain, and then have that chain really being super popular, super active. Then they can even generate more revenues. But the separation between centralized and decentralized exchanges is really on the ownership of the keys and the custody of the tokens. And that will be a clear limitation. So although some entities will be playing on both sides, like Coinbase and the Base chain, for example, but those are two different products. I personally like what you mentioned, where centralized exchanges could be used almost as an on-ramp and off-ramp solution. That's what I personally do. If I want to buy something with fiat tokens, fiat money, I usually use a centralized exchange. It's faster. I can trust them on that. And then I move the token to my self-custody wallet, do whatever I want. If I need to pay bills in real life, then I also do the opposite way around. And then I send my tokens to the centralized exchange and then send them to my bank in a very secure and fast transaction. That's my personal interaction with both systems. Where I also see that they cannot really converge to the 100% merge is on the regulation side of things. So when DEXs are here for decentralized and almost anonymous transactions, centralized exchange have to comply. So they need to comply with the KYC, they need to comply with governments, they need to be able to freeze accounts. And I think it makes sense. If a terrorist organization, for example, is moving money through a centralized exchange, I personally agree with the fact that we should freeze their accounts. But then who decides that they are a terrorist organization or not? That line is blurry, and sometimes it's super clear, sometimes it's not. So on regulations, I think centralized exchanges are necessary because they comply with the regulations and the companies that are like banks and financial institutions. But on the other side, the industry started with this decentralization ethos, and that's why I don't think both entities will be completely merged. I think people will be using both. Companies will be actually acting on both sides, but there will always be two different products. And to conclude, there's also on the functionality side of things, I mentioned order books, I mentioned derivatives, limit orders, and like all of this is coming to decentralized exchanges. And even the liquidity fragmentation is being solved by the industry with like liquidity across multiple chains being accessible. But that's something that is still being worked on. It's not already launched. I know that in the future it's going to be available. So I think the experience is going to be very similar in the future. But the core concept of either owning or not owning that wallet is what's going to be the separation.
And also a lot of interesting new like emerging cases of Web 2.5 and then kind of automated onboarding and into the Web3 economy are fueling kind of this trade-off between, hey, do I want to be fully anonymous or do I want to just buy this, event ticket key, access point, and so on. So fundamentally, people in many cases won't mind getting doxxed if that means that they can, leverage the systems that make their life easier, right? If we're trying to buy something in the crypto world with a credit card, I don't necessarily have to worry about, setting, onboarding that, sending money elsewhere, and so on. So, and that trade-off creates those user-friendly solutions that are not necessarily fully fitting the decentralized ethos, but at the same time providing kind of the new easy way to enter the economy for those who do not know the depths of it.
All right, let me play devil's advocate here. So we talked about decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges, and we touched upon regulation. So I'd like to go deeper there. So in terms of centralized exchanges, we understand that if an exchange wants to be a big player in any particular jurisdiction, they must collaborate with the government in one way or another, whether it's KYC, AML, or whatever. In terms of DEXs, it's a bit difficult and a bit different because why would you use, when person goes to DEX, there's a particular reason he goes there, he or she goes there. And because of that, I'd like to ask you, what do you think is the future of regulation? If for centralized exchanges, it is more or less clear. For decentralized exchanges, especially in the Western world, it is more blurry. I'd like to ask you, Alessandro, first, and then we go around, because how do you regulate decentralized exchanges in a way that they don't lose the competitive advantages that they have?
So if you think about Uniswap, that has been one of the biggest protocol used on this sense, they are an American company at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, they need to add a layer of filtering that is like chain analysis, whatever. I think they use TMR. But they need to block, the sanction wallet. So they need to do this filtering, and so that's like it comes down where your legal entity is, and if you want to have the FBI at the door or not. If you are public figure like Uniswap, you need to filter. So yes, you still have as a customer self custody. However, they will block and as you said, sometimes maybe is a pedophile trying to actually move funds because he sold some picture online. So you want to actually get those guys, right? And but yeah, so there is something that has to be done. However, maybe regulation will arrive a little bit later on. So there is whatever maybe a drug dealer and the coins move very quickly, so the address is not sanctioned yet and is able maybe to cash out or to swap chain, whatever, right? So yes, is yes to a certain degree, right?
Let's go, Shubham.
Okay. From my background, so I come from two extreme places. One is UAE, Dubai, and second is India. So in India, it's very important to follow the compliances. Recently, OKX has filed with AML of India. So if you use any centralized exchange, you need to pay flat 31% tax. So even if I earn a profit of 30%, 30%, yeah. So say suppose. Say suppose if I earn $1,000, so I need to pay $300 to government flat on the same day. So that is the major issue in India. But right now there are a lot of hacks on that particular side. So if you use decentralized exchange, first and the foremost is OTC. definitely you can do that. Second is about on-ramp and off-ramp. There are some on-ramp, off-ramp, like there is a company called as onramp.money. So that provides you INR instead of your USDT or any particular currency which you hold on any other chain or DEXs. So you can directly off-ramp. You don't have to use centralized exchange for that. Second, you have crypto cards as well, debit cards and stuff. So you can use directly, but they have a quite higher fees, but still as compared to 30%, it's very low. And as compared to other things as well, it's very low. And right now in Georgia, I've seen like Wendy's accepting USDT and stuff. So it's quite innovative for me as well. Apart from that, on the other side of DEXs, as you mentioned, they need to do, like as a Uniswap, it's a quite big. It's the only name which we know because they have done patents on V3 and stuff. And they have already worked with the government. So that's the reason they need to follow all the compliances. But I'm really sure that all the DEXs on any other layer too, like you can take Optimism, Arbitrum, Veritrum, anyone who is doing AML or anything with anyone, because they don't have information. If I use my MetaMask, anyone doesn't know like who am I until and unless I connect with some NFTs, ENS or anything else. So I think so for the decentralized exchange, there are a lot of ways you can easily get out your money, and that's what I'm doing as well. And on the centralized exchange, so it's quite difficult as well in all the places. Like it's not just India, it's US as well. When I go to US for Denver, I can't use WorldCoin over there because that doesn't show my wallet value. So that's the major issue with all the biggest countries as well. So I think so decentralized exchange can be a better way, but as on my previous statement, so if you are a newbie into the space, you can't directly go with the decentralized exchange.
Yeah, it's a tough question actually, but in terms of like compliance for DEXs, the answer is very different from one region or one country to the other, obviously. But the DEXs are here for that like decentralized experience and even a private experience. That being said, the governments have the power of like shutting down the DEX completely in their jurisdiction. Although people can use VPNs and all kinds of like workarounds, but that hurts the DEX a lot. If the US says no to Uniswap tomorrow, Uniswap is in big trouble. So there might be a political push to force the DEXs to implement KYC rules for certain users, maybe not globally, but I see a big pushback. Where I see also adoption of, for example, KYC solutions is like, and this could be kind of a compromise because there are today new KYC solutions that don't necessarily dox your identity with ZK proofs, with like proofs of humanity where you're not necessarily sharing your information, but you're sharing that you are a real human and you are whoever you are. And potentially if we can push that to the next layer of if something bad happens, maybe the governments can have access to the actual information, just to make sure that like we have a way of going after either hackers or bad actors in real life. I think that's where potentially the DEX industry will be going, implementing those solutions instead of like really implementing a proof of like, here's my ID or here's my passport and it's me, and the DEX is going to share my information with the tax agency, which would be a catastrophe in the end, because we would have defeated the purpose of the crypto industry if we go that route.
Yeah, but let's also not forget that the tax agencies are in it for the money as well, so they will find new ways to, dox people, to get to, hey, those are your transfers and so on. They're going to try to push their CBDCs. They're going to try regulate stablecoin issuers. So, fundamentally, anything they can do, they will do, of course, because it's their business and they have to do it. They don't want to lose their business as well, right? Exactly. And some governments, right, are introducing new legislation just because they became popular crypto destinations. So they're like, hey, why can't we leverage that into more revenue for the state, which is fine, but fundamentally it is the developer community that is kind of driving the alternative means of doing things, especially as we're proceeding to see some hybrid scenarios of plug-and-play adoption and integration between the systems that allows you for transactions not necessarily connected to your identity, as you correctly mentioned, with ID verification, zero knowledge proof. Yeah. I want to ask you, about ZK. If you think, government will look into that, because I don't see that coming, shortly.
Actually, even I wanted to say on the ZK side. So actually on the ZK, if you know, like the technology works on the probability. So the more proofs are verified on a same side, so that's how like the proof is actually verified. So on this side, if or then works, right? So for example, if I am an Indian citizen, how I can prove it? Local ID or a passport. If I want to prove it was ZK identification solution, so I need to either give him a passport number, either to give him a picture of mine, or I need to give some other proof. Like I can't give the whole photo of the passport, but I need to share some of the details so that he can verify that it is possible that he is an Indian citizen. So there are two compliances over here. So the first one, if I share that, so it's already doxed. If I prove that I'm an Indian citizen, so he knows that even if I use a decentralized exchange, still he knows that I'm a citizen. And apart from that, I'm not sure if government will be using ZK proof, because eventually it's working on probability. First, they need to validate that ZK proofs are valid. If they do that, it's again similar to Bitcoin ETFs and stuff, that government is approving that ZK's proof can be validated and it can be accepted across the government agencies. And if that is the case, so we are happy to do that, because eventually it will solve our problem as well. We're getting a validation from government that the crypto industry is actually working on the codes.
But with ZK also is what you can verify is that, for example, you're not saying that you are an Indian citizen, but for example, you can validate that you're not a US citizen, in which case you're not giving out your actual, identity or citizenship. And that's what kind of a lot of the ZK solutions revolve around, right? You say what you're not, and that oftentimes validates it. So there's a lot of...
It's like I'm not American, right?
That's right.
Febe, last point.
Well, just to answer his question, I think the governments will try to come after the ZK proof and proofs of identity systems, but it's going to be tough because it's all like based on cryptography, and it sometimes even the protocol itself cannot like decrypt things. So, but I also see that there's an advantage in using or at least doxing some aspects of your identity. Think about like credit today. It all works with credit scores, and you have access to free money if you are trustworthy in a certain way. That cannot be applied to crypto today, because otherwise I would just be getting money from everybody and then disappearing. But if you can have an identity with a ZK proof that doesn't show your name, doesn't show anything personal, but like has access to your credit score and potentially has access to changing and affecting your credit score, then you would start caring about that identity and potentially having access to credit like in real life. So I think both sides will need to kind of look deeper into the concept of an identity and a digital identity. I think that the decentralized communities will start adopting it for use cases like the one I just mentioned. And I also think that the governments will potentially understand that they cannot control everything. So as long as they control like access to certain services based on nationality, for example, that could be a good way of kind of saying, okay, all these people are American citizens, so they're not supposed to touch this because this is a security. I need to be an investor, for example. Or all these people are on a blacklist because they are convicted criminals or they've been doing like money laundering, so they should be also blacklisted online. So those use cases, I think we will get to an agreement between both audiences. But forcing everybody to interact with DEXs the same way they interact with banks today, I don't think it will happen or it will work.
Guys, thank you very much. It's been 45 minutes. Let's give a huge round of applause to Femi, Shubham, Alessandro, and Jay for very nice and interesting panel discussion.